When you look at other coaches who are where you want to be, you start to wonder what they know that you don't. The difference isn't that the other person is smarter, better, or more dedicated than everyone else. The difference is that they figured out how to be well connected. In this week's Hot Seat episode, Jonathan shares some behind the scenes moves others have made to create their own rooms that the people they want to be around want to be invited to. I'll be back at the end to recommend another episode. Enjoy.
Today is going to be it's funny because this is an online training mentorship, but one of the things that I'm sure many of you have already realized, I know we've had some conversations about it, like Miles, you and I have had a couple conversations about just how one of the best ways actually to build online is to do stuff like in real life or in person. And so there's going to be a little bit of that here, but also there's going to be some of taking these same principles and actually leveraging them online for things like little events or get-togethers and things. And so I'll kind of walk the line both ways. As I was thinking about what topic to cover on this call, what I realized was that many of the most successful people that I know, they do stuff behind the scenes that nobody really sees. Like that's the reason that they're successful. And there's lots of fun little examples of this. The way that I kind of envision it in my head or make sense of it in my head, I don't know if this makes sense to anybody else, is that well, all of us that are working really hard to achieve or better ourselves or better our position in life or whatever, we're kind of all in a group pushing up against this invisible barrier that I don't know about you, but I feel sometimes. There's this barrier, no matter where you are, no matter how far you've gone, there's this barrier that you're pushing up against, and there's other people that are in a similar position to you, or at least you think they might be in a similar position to you, that are also pushing up against this same barrier as you are. And most of the time, we never cross that barrier. But every so often somebody does. And that somebody, when I started to when I started in this online fitness world in 2009, really, but 2011 in earnest, and I started to see people kind of jump across this barrier. Like, I started to think, what are they doing? Do I think that they're smarter than I am? Do I think that their engine burns harder than mine does? In some cases, maybe. Like, but Contreras, like his brain just thinks a different way than mine does, right? And so he's clearly going to be able to read more studies and focus on the same thing for a much longer period of time than I ever am. And so in that way, his engine burns harder than mine. Do I think that they are inherently more lucky? Like maybe, like there's a lot of these things, but what I kind of came to is really, maybe this is overly optimistic, but I didn't think that they were any better than I was in most cases. I didn't think that they were any smarter. I didn't think that they had any other special advantages. I didn't think that they knew anything that I didn't know. And so I started to really think, what is it that these people are doing that's helped them leap across this invisible line? Um, and as I got to know many of them, I started asking them questions, not like how they leapt across it, but just like questions, like deeper questions about what they did. And what I realized is that in every single case, there was something or a few things that they did behind the scenes that they never talk about. Sometimes it's just like funny kind of gray area shit. Like I remember meeting one woman, for example, she wasn't even in the fitness industry, but um, she was having trouble getting booked on stages for speaking. And people would reach out to her, and she wasn't getting paid what she was worth. Like people were reaching out for her, asking her to speak, but they weren't willing to pay her, or weren't willing to pay her very much. And what she started to do then is when they'd reach out to her, she would pass them off to a booking agent, to a speaking agent. And the speaking agent would then negotiate on her behalf. The speaking agent was a male with a generic white male name. She was a woman. The speaking agent was her controlling a different email account. You see what she did? In pretending that she was somebody else that was in this professional whatever, she was able to negotiate basically better rates. And so, there are examples of that. But the biggest example is that, or the biggest thing that I noticed that these people did is that before they could get into certain rooms, before they could speak on certain stages, before they could get themselves meetings or interviews or as parts of groups or whatever that were perhaps a few steps above them of like people who were at the place that they wanted to get to, um, they just made their own room and invited those people into their own room. There's a story there's a story that I remember reading from this book. Martin, do you want to tell your theory? You want to wait?
Um, I can wait until you're done because I'm really interested in what you have to say right now.
All right, all right, all right. I'll call on you a bit.
I
Um,
have a yeah. I'll wait.
okay. What's the context real quick so I know when to call on you?
Being a trainer of color online and the responses that I've gotten
Oh,
from people, it's a whole different game. And I've talked to a few other trainers of color, and there's
talk to
it's
me about that
and I've
now
had
then. Talk to me about that now if you can, because I don't know where I would revisit that, but it's really important to talk about.
yeah. Let me yeah. So it's there's a disconnect in dealing with clients. It's just a perception, and again, I'm reluctant to try, and I'm not trying to play like the race card, but I think that it's very different for trainers of color online. There's a whole different battle that we have to go through to gain the respect and sort of gain the attention of people. And
Hmm.
I've had that said to me on several occasions. And at first I was like, oh, it's just harder. There's this level of I don't know if it's distrust or sort of like the commitment that's just not there as opposed to other trainers that that don't have to go through that hurdle.
Hmm.
Does that make any sense what I'm talking about? No, it's
I mean, I understand what you're saying, and I appreciate you saying it. You know, I I don't relate to it because I'm not of color, so I haven't experienced it. I mean, I had somebody who worked for me. She did PR for me, and she was a Chinese American woman, and I still remember she was doing PR. She was trying to get like magazine placements and stuff like that, and she wasn't doing that well. And then one day she reached out to me. She was, "Good idea. I got you there's a columnist for Inc. magazine that wants to do a piece on you and your course in the Online
yeah,
Trainer Academy. Um, they're going to reach out to you. The only thing to know is that if they say where they heard of you from, my name is Doug." What she
yeah,
realized, she wasn't getting any bites because she had an Asian American name, right? And
yeah,
and her email was that. She wasn't getting any bites. And then she created a new email and it was like Doug Smith or something. Like it was just like this like generic white guy name.
yeah,
She's like, people started
yeah.
responding to me. So that's my
Yeah. Well,
only
for me, it's
experience
been
with it, but I can't
yeah.
relate, obviously.
Well, for me, it was what happened a couple of times is where I had one of my buddies who's also a trainer online, someone that he really couldn't work with, and he recommended me to them, and I talked to him over the phone, and then we set up a Zoom call to talk. And when we got on the Zoom call, there was just this immediate like blank stare, and I knew this blank
Hmm.
stare, and they were like, oh, okay. And so they ended up being like a 5-minute Zoom call, and then they reached out to my buddy who set it up and said, hey, you didn't tell me, this is an African American trainer. Look, I'm not saying that it's not okay, but I just kind of feel uncomfortable. And I'd had
Really?
that happen to me a couple of times. And so when you brought up that, that it just kind of reminded me of that. So I feel like that's something that some of us go through sometimes. I don't use it as a crutch, believe me. I'm like, fuck it, there's other people out there that are willing to work with me.
Sure.
But I found that that's an invisible hurdle that I've had to overcome. And there are going to
Wow.
be people who sort of, poo poo it, but even in person, I've had that several times where I've met with people in person after seeing them on the phone, and they're just like, "Oh, okay, well." So I find that it happens. It's sort of a common thread throughout, my online experience for the most part. But I don't let it bother me. It's just, it is what it is.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Well, thanks for sharing that, man.
I hope that was, informative in some way.
No, it was. I mean, those types of things are crazy to me that they still happen, that it exists in any way.
Yeah.
It's wild. Uh, okay. So the story, the kind of famous story from this, or when I started to realize, call it like the power of connecting people, was this book, and it's a very well-known book. It's by somebody named Keith Ferrazzi. It's an old book. It's called Never Eat Alone. And I don't even remember what he did, but I guess Ferrazzi was the sales guy who sold like enterprise software. Don't quote me on the specifics of it, but he sold enterprise software to big corporations. And enterprise software sales is a long sales cycle. Like these contracts are hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars each. And the person who buys them is generally the CTO, is the chief technical officer for the company. Like they're the person who signs off on it. And so what Keith started doing is he started to, instead of calling these CTOs and trying to say, hey, I'm a whatever representative of the software, can you do it? He started hosting breakfasts of the CTOs in town. Because what he realized is that most companies, the technical department of the company was like one or a few people. Like it wasn't a big part of the company. And so the CTO might be the only person in that company. Like they're often very much on an island. And the CTOs don't know each other. The CTOs of different companies in the same town don't know each other. And so what he did is he would call them up and he would say, "Hey, I'm hosting a breakfast with 3 or 4 CTOs. The so-and-so CTO of this company is already coming, right? And I'd love for you to come. I'd love for you to come if you want to meet some of these other folks. It's breakfast. You go off to work afterwards. I'm paying." And what happened is that each breakfast was 3 or 4 people, and he'd sit down, and the 3 or 4 people would sit down too, and he'd say to them, "Look, I'm here to pick up the check. I'm not involved in this, like you guys talk, you guys hang out." And that's what he did, and he picked up the check, and that was it. According to the book, according to the story, this was the only main thing that Ferrazzi did to become the best-selling salesman in the history of his company. Because what he correctly identified was that everybody wants connection. Few people ever get around to connecting. And that asymmetry is an opportunity to, call it, swing above your league, like bat above your average. You can figure out how to be around people that would be very, very hard to get around by connecting those people to other people, even if you don't really know either of them. And I want to tell you about a couple examples of that. I'll give you some in person, and then I'll give you some online. So the first example is that, like I said, if you can't get into a room, make your own room. Andrew Coates is a good example of this. He wanted to speak more. He wanted to do more public speaking. So he formed his own event, and he spoke on the stage at his own event. And then he invited other speakers who, at the beginning, if they were to host events, wouldn't have called him. Luca Hosafar is an example of that, right? Where, he brought Luca in to speak at his event. Now he's speaking at Luca's event. My friend Giovanni Mosico did this on an even bigger level. He wanted to be seen on the same level as guys like a Gary Vaynerchuk, a Seth Godin, or whatever. He just put on massive conferences, invited these people to speak, and then he spoke as well. All of a sudden now he put himself on the stage with them because it was his own stage, and opened himself up to other opportunities. I mean, I did the same thing back in the day one of the main ways that I built up my reputation in the industry was I hosted little events. I did it. I mean, I don't know if I lost money on them. I certainly didn't go above break even. They weren't that much effort. I think I did 3 of them I mean, it was the gym that I worked at had a studio in the back that nobody used on the weekends. And they let me, I rented a projector. I borrowed a projector from friends. I rented chairs and I had them delivered there. And I reached out to people and I asked them if they wanted to speak at the event. And I got, 50, 60 people to attend, mainly people in my own town. The tickets were super, super cheap. And what that did is that built my own, and I flew them in and I put them up in a hotel. It cost me a few $1,000s. And like I said, I think I broke even. But what that did is it helped me build relationships with a lot of people who were ahead of me at that time in the industry, because I called them to speak. And so that's one thing for sure, is to invite people into something like that. But it doesn't have to be that big. Like, that's a lot of work. That's a lot of effort. It's not a crazy amount of effort. It's actually less effort than you think. But it's enough effort that can be daunting and can be like a big addition to whatever you're doing. One of the things that I've noticed is that most of these types of things, like I said, everybody wants connection. Nobody wants to go to the effort to connect. But people are really, really happy when somebody else connects them. And it really isn't that much work. I can get into, if you guys are interested afterwards, I can get into like some of the more mechanics of getting speakers, and even the same thing. Like, I just went through the really, it was the only process for the Obvious Choice book that I was really nervous about and not looking forward to, which is asking for endorsements for the cover and back cover of the book. I I just went through it. I just finished it. But that was by far the most difficult part of the process for me, because when you write a book, or when you put out a piece of work like that, I don't know, maybe I'm alone in this, but it's the one time where I had to ask for a lot of favors from other people without being able to give them much in return. And I found that really, really difficult to do. And kind of by definition, like, people who are busy and important. Right? And so what I did there, and I can talk more with events, but this is something that I learned from events, is you don't ask everybody at once. You do it in a sequence. And the first step is you get an anchor. And so I went pretty far out of my way, and actually spent a lot of money, to really nail down like 1 or 2 folks. There were 2 actually in mind. And I worked on it for months, 3, 4 months. People with very important positions, people who have name recognition, and really went out of my way to support them, to build relationships with them. I flew to see them, like, for no other reason. I'd fly to see them and stay in a hotel. I multiple times in one case, they had a charity. I made a very sizable donation to the charity, like that type of thing. Because what that allowed me to do then is make it so that there was reciprocation, so that I had given them a lot in advance and built a relationship with them in advance. And then when I asked them, it was a much easier ask, and they would say yes to me. And so both of them said yes to me. And then the next part of the sequence is going to looser connections, or connections maybe where I didn't have that reciprocation in place. Now I'm able to say, these people are doing this thing. Would you also like to do this thing? And with events, it's the same. You want 1 or 2 what's called anchor speakers first, and then you can reach out to other speakers and be like, hey, if this person is involved, It doesn't have to be somebody like famous. It could just be somebody with a good title. So I can get into the mechanics of that more, or other stuff like that, like super tactical stuff like that, if you're interested. But it doesn't have to be this big. Anybody listen to the podcast interview that I did with Lisa Simone Richards on the podcast? She's a PR specialist. It was a really, really great interview. She's awesome. But one of the things that I asked her is, okay, so like we're not talking about getting media, like getting in the newspaper or getting on TV. I appear as a guest on a podcast. What can I do afterwards to optimize the results of me being a guest on that podcast? Right? Like somebody interviews me, they probably don't have that big of an audience or even any audience, but I want to be able to leverage this. How can I leverage this as good as possible? And she said, all of the basic stuff that you would expect, can obviously promote it, try to add value to them and promoting it and getting more listeners to it. See if you can get the video, cut it up into shorts, put it on your social media, tag them, do collabs with them. She said all that stuff, which is all stuff that I had thought about and known. Don't do, but thought about and known. But what she also said that I loved is she said she went through a bout a year ago where she decided she was going to do 100 podcast interviews. Now that's overkill. You don't have to do 100. But multiple times what she did is she said, how can I add value to these other podcast hosts? And how can I also keep myself top of mind and get myself booked on more shows? And so she came up with a brilliant idea, which is she started hosting what she called Lisa's podcast party. And multiple times what she did is she invited 10 to 15 different hosts that had interviewed her to meet each other on a Zoom call. Tuesday at 3 p.m. for an hour. Hey Shane, I've been on a whole bunch of podcasts in the last while. And I thought, these hosts might want to get to know each other. Like they're all doing the same types of podcasts and similar fields. I thought that it might be a value for you to get to know other people doing similar things to you. And so Tuesday at 3 p.m., what I'm doing is I'm just hosting like a podcast party call where I'm going to bring 10 or 15 different podcast hosts and we're just going to meet each other and we're going to share what we're doing and, if we need help with anything. Would you like to attend? Yes, great. Do you know of anybody else who you think might want to attend? So brilliant. And so she did that. And of course, other people invited other folks that were other podcast hosts that they knew that Lisa didn't know. And those people, of course, started interviewing Lisa on their podcasts and so on and so on and so on. So she said this on our show when we did that interview. And I was like, oh, that's brilliant. That's my golden nugget. I'm hosting John's author party. And so 2 days later, I sent out invites to 20 different authors who some I knew like commented back and forth on their stuff. Some people I didn't know at all. Like I followed them on Twitter, for example. I had no idea, like we had never spoken. But I picked a date and that date was the week following. And I chose a very short period of time on purpose between the date that I sent the invite and the date of the event. Because if I chose a longer period of time, more people would have said yes, but then more people would have canceled closer to, because future you often hates current you. And so if somebody says yes to something that's happening in 4 days, they're probably going to attend that thing in 4 days. If somebody says yes to something that's happening in 2 months, it's kind of them saying, hey, that sounds kind of interesting. And then 1.5 months comes and they say, oh, I can't believe that I agreed to that. And then they message you and they cancel and pop off. So I booked it for like the following week. I sent 20 invites. 10 people attended. So first off, you're going to get a lot of people that are going to say no. You're going to get a lot of people who just can't make it that time, which is fine. In almost every case, the person said, didn't say I'm not interested. They just say I can't make whatever Tuesday at 3 p.m. But I'd love to be at the next one. like I said, some were purely cold outreach, which was cool. So we all showed up on a Zoom call like this, which was amazing. And the call was super simple. I gave everybody 5 or 6 minutes. We went a little bit long because I didn't manage it well. We gave everybody 5 or 6 minutes where we introduced ourselves, where we bragged about ourselves, talked about the great things that we've done, talked about the topic of the book that we're working on, said what we can help with, and then said what we need help with. Not everybody did every one of those. And then we logged off. I created a Google Doc or a Google Sheet where everybody could enter in their information to keep in touch with folks if they wanted to, and everybody did. And then we logged off. Soon after, a podcast came out like 2 weeks later that were two of the people that were on the call that I hosted for my John's author party. Well, one of them was interviewing the other one because one of them was just coming out with a book, and one of them hosts a really popular podcast for authors. Now, the cool part about that was they didn't know each other before the call, and I didn't know either of them. I didn't know either. One of them I texted back and forth with a little bit, but I didn't know either of them. But I was the reason that they connected. I was the one who made that connection. I was the one who added value to those people. In that way, just because I was like, yo, I'm doing a Zoom call. This took me like 20 minutes. Yo, I'm doing a Zoom call. It's happening this time. I created a Calendly link with one event in it at one time. I wrote the same invite and I sent it to 20 people and 10 said yes. So I ask you, I guess, is that something that you think that you could do? Because one of the things that I see people doing behind the scenes are their connectors. They build the rooms that they want to one day be able to be invited into. And then they invite people who are, maybe perceived to be bigger deals in that world than they are. There's a Mike Michalowicz who wrote a book called Profit First, hosts a group. It's not a mastermind. It's an invite thing. It's not a paid thing, but hosts a group of authors. There's 30 or 40 of them. And in order to be invited to this get together weekend, you have to have sold over 1 million copies of your books, which is like, I think there's 20 books a year that sell 1 million copies, like 20 new books a year sell 1 million copies. Not a lot of people are able to reach that. Like, that's a pretty exceptional mark. When Mike created that group, he had sold nowhere close to 1 million copies of books. But what he realized is that people who have sold that many books want to meet other people who have sold that many books. And so he had one or two of them in his network. He used them as the anchor people. And then he started inviting more folks in. Well, what happens, of course, is that because Mike connected them, all of these other people now support Mike. Well, now Mike has sold over 1 million copies of his books. His books are good, but also largely because all of these other folks that are already bestsellers endorse his books, talk about his books when they come out, because he's provided them this value. I don't know, Jacob, this triggering anything in you?
You said Jacob?
Yeah.
An example comes to mind. It has nothing to do with podcasting, but I have a bi-weekly Bible study,
Yeah.
and it by not by design, but just by default, there's a lot of Miami fitness people in this Bible study.
Cool.
And one of
Okay.
them owns a gym called Peak 360. It's
Yeah.
a CrossFit gym. And have you heard of it?
Nope.
Okay.
Nope.
The guy who owns it, he founded Wada, and he competed this past CrossFit Games in the Masters. He came in third in the Masters. His name's Guido Trinidad. Him and his wife own it.
Okay.
And
It's a
they
badass
produced some crazy high-level athletes. Yeah, right. Anyway, long story short, he studied. And now Meal Prep Guy has a fridge at Peak 360 where he's
Right.
selling his meal prep services to the gym clients. Same Bible study. I've got a friend he's an athletic trainer. Like his goal, he's doing online training. I've told him about OTM. Maybe he'll get in one day. But his avatar is people wanting to do better at their sport.
Yep.
Peak 360 has been looking for an athletic trainer to add to their team.
Right.
They met at the same Bible study, and now
Who do you
he's
think
being
gets the call?
contracted out.
Yeah.
What's that?
Yeah. It's so cool. Who do you think gets the call? Of course he gets the call. So what you're hitting on, Jacob, I love so much. So happy I called on you there. What you're hitting on are connections forged based on uncommon commonalities. Now, I mean, studying the Bible is not exactly uncommon, but you know what I mean. An uncommon commonality is something that you have in common that not everybody has in common, and it's a point of connection to other people. You know, you could even have fun with it, right? You can be like, there's got to be a clever name in there somewhere, like fit dudes who do Bibles, or fit dudes who read Bibles, or or Bibles and biceps or something. You know, will you like specifically call out? And maybe some of the study is about, because the Bible talks a lot about the importance of health and work and activity. Maybe it's just a Bible study, and you know, there's 2 points of connection. Like you care about your health and fitness, and you want to talk about the Bible, and you want to study the Bible together. Like, I mean, what a great point of connection that is. Bibles and biceps.
To trademark it.
Do it. That could be actually like a thing.
I bet you it's out there.
It's probably out there. It's probably out there. But like, I mean, to be honest, that could even be just like a full-on business. It's like, this is the Bibles and biceps, like San Francisco chapter. This is the Bibles and biceps Toronto chapter. Right. But you know, I really love that. I really love that. And you're right. I mean, that's how opportunities are given. Like, oh, you know, you're never going to read about that in a job finding book. You're never going to read about that in like a book about how to have more opportunities or get chosen. You know, it's like, oh, how did you get your job? It's like, well, I went to a Bible study group, and somebody else there owned a CrossFit gym, and they were looking for an athletic trainer. It was an athletic trainer.
Pretty much.
And you know, so I got the call because we knew each other that way. I love that. Thank you for bringing that up.
Sure.
Michael, what's coming to mind with you?
Just thinking about a couple things when you were talking. One is the book, Never Eat Alone. I have it on my bookshelf. I haven't eaten it yet. I haven't read it yet.
I haven't read it in like 15 years. Tell me how it is. I just always remember that story.
It was a piece of advice to read it, given to me by mentor. But it's interesting that I look at him as a mentor, but I don't, he's actually a client. And he owns a physical therapy clinic that's like a hybrid. So you think of movement as a spectrum, right? Like, so I'm a physical therapist. I think of movement as spectrum. Here is like rehab, and you're not doing a lot of movement. And here is you're a high level athlete, right? And it's just spectrum of movement. And so he started a hybrid business where he does, fitness coaching. He's got personal trainers. He's got RDs, stuff like that. But he was a client of mine. He did really well. He's a high achiever and everything. And he does like you know, somewhere around $1 million a year. Now, of course, he's not taking that home since he has a bunch of employees, but
Yeah.
it's like if I had, I don't know how I would leverage that as far as, not that I'm trying to benefit. I think it would be a great thing just to bring him in and connect people. And I know that connecting people is a positive and works well for you.
Well,
But my thought is,
he sounds like almost like an anchor member of a community, right? So
right,
I think, you know, and he probably wants to meet other folks too, whether it's uh physical therapists or even other, I mean, to be honest, even other business owners. Like um I think, I mean, put it this way, like I live in Etobicoke, like just outside of it's part of Toronto technically, but I live in a place called Etobicoke. Etobicoke is a lot of really interesting people who live here. I don't know a lot of them. I would love to know more of them. And so I know my neighbors, you know, and we have a great community and we have lots of friends. But if somebody were to call me up one day and say, "Hey man, we're getting together on Thursday night at the Wing Place, you know, around the corner, just on the other side of Islington there. And you know, there's 5 or 6 business owners. One of the guys owns does like $1 million out of his physiotherapy clinic, you know, in the area. And we're just getting together and sharing some wings and, you know, getting to know one another. Do you want to come?" I would go so far out of my way to attend that.
yeah,
So far out of my way to attend that. And so what are we all trying to do? We're basically all trying to be the center of connection. You know, we're trying to be the obvious choice in our communities of wealthy and well-connected people. Well, you can try to find well-connected people and ingratiate yourself to them, or you can become the well-connected person by connecting other people to one another. The second one is a lot easier until you're in demand. And it's kind of hard to be in demand. It's kind of hard to get to the point where you're in demand unless you're and at that point you're having opportunities come to you, so you're not needing to create opportunities. Um, yeah, that's how I would. I mean, I kind of want to do that in my area now.
something that you said there, it it made something click. A well-connected person, like it just kind of like clicked. Like that's something that you want to be. And if you want to know this type of person, we'll talk to Mike because he knows a lot of well-connected people, and you can meet a lot of well-connected people that way.
Yeah.
So
I mean, other folks will start bringing in their friends, right? So the first one, I mean, it's not hard to get these people's phone numbers or emails. Like they all live in your area. You can probably just literally, like, you could walk into I don't know, a restaurant or a clinic or whatever in your area that's been there for a long time and be like, you know, I really love that restaurant. I'd love to get to know the owner. You could just like walk into the restaurant, ask to see, like the owner would probably be there or the manager would probably be there. It wouldn't be hard to get to know them. And I mean, I would just approach it like that. Like I would pick a night, I would pick a time and a spot. I'd speak to my buddy first, how get them involved. And
yep,
then you can use exactly like you said. You're like, yo, you know that place on Dundas Street? It's whatever physiotherapy clinic. You know they do $1 million out of that thing? I'm pretty good friends with the owner. Like he's coming down for this. He's actually going to share a little bit about like what he's doing in the area. Um,
yeah,
you know, I'd love for you to come too. I just I think it'd be cool just to have like people doing good things in this area meet each other. Some might say no, some might say I can't make that night.
sure,
And then once somebody says yes, all that I do is I say, look, we got 6 spots. Um, you know, is there totally cool if not, but is there anybody you think might be a good fit for this you want to invite? Uh, And I found that generally the first time or the first 1 or 2 or even 3 times, people don't really invite that many people,
Sure.
but then they start to. Because then
Yeah.
it starts, because the reason why somebody else is going to invite somebody else is not because they think that that other person will benefit. And it's not because they think that that other person will provide value to the event. They're going to do it because they want to increase their perceived social equity towards that person. So they're going to do it if they think it's going to make them look good by being a part of this group to that person that they're going to invite.
Gotcha. Yeah.
And so in
Yeah,
order
that
for that
makes
to happen, they need to know that this group is like a group of good people, good dudes.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that makes absolute sense. I mean, so I have a few acquaintances that are like well-known people in physical therapy that I interact with a little bit uh, online and just comment on their posts and
Mhm.
we talk back and forth. But I know this one really well. He was a client. Maybe just kind of talking to some of them and being the connector there for a lot of them.
Yeah. You
Yeah,
could do it.
no,
You could do it one of two ways, right? You could do like a muscle a Michael's PT party, on like a Zoom call, and then you get all these online PTs.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Or you could do it like locally, and locally I wouldn't limit myself to PTs. Locally, I would just go after like great local business owners.
yeah, yeah,
Because online, what you're kind of looking for is, I mean, you're looking to build connections with people who are gonna more work together and rise up together. It's a different kind of connection that the reason is online you kind of need people to already be connected in some way in order for you to benefit because it's just too big. Whereas locally, everybody is already connected because they live close to one another. And so online, if you just get like cool people doing cool things from all over the place, you're gonna get one over here, one over here, one over there, one over there. Nothing's gonna come of it really,
sure.
the same way. But if they're in the same kind of world, in the same community, then there'll be more of that. So I would look at it as one of those two different ways.
Yeah, I actually have a question about this, and unless you want to hop to someone
Go
else,
for it.
that which is fine. So
Miles, I
someone
want to hit on
actually,
you next because we've talked about some of this stuff. I don't know if you're there or not, but if you are, I'd love to hear from you next. But go for it, Michael.
yeah. So someone who I graduated school, he like created this physio mentorship, and now he's got like the active life guy, I don't remember his name, and Andrew Coates speaking, and um a bunch of like Allie, I can't think of her name. She's like the testosterone. Um, I can't
Oh
think of her
yeah,
name.
yeah, yeah. I've been connected to you for a long time. Who is this? What is this?
His name is Roger St. Onge, but he had this like online speaking event, and I haven't talked to him for like maybe 2 or 3 years, but
Okay.
um, I think really why he did it was to just get his name out there and have himself be the connector and
Sure.
have people like, oh, he's connected all these people. I'm going to send him the business if people are looking for a PT mentorship. Um, but yeah, uh,
I
but
mean,
yeah,
if
I can
I
understand.
really wanted to push the online trainer mentorship, what I would do is I would host probably twice a year massive online summits. Call it the Online Trainer Summit, whatever, right? And I would have 50 to 75 speakers at each summit. And it would happen over 3 days. And I would do it as a list builder, and I would, we would invite people to inquire about the mentorship. But what I would really be doing is I would be reaching out to everybody kind of up and coming and ask them if they wanted to speak. It would be more targeted towards building relationships with the speakers than it would be in generating an audience. The reason that I don't do that is it's kind of a shitty thing to do for the speaker. it's like I'm just gonna like not give you an audience, but like use you to get to know you and to get to know people like you. So, but in terms of like a business thing, I would do it. I would do it for that reason. Because most of those people would become probably mentors, mentorees. I don't know. Students, I don't know what to call you guys, friends of the mentorship of ours. But that's what I would do. Yeah. Yeah. And then maybe evolve that to something in person, but like it's pretty easy to do this stuff online.
Sure.
I mean, that's like the biggest benefit of hosting a podcast is it's a way for you to network. Like if you want to get to know somebody. But this is just kind of an easier, faster way than having to build a whole podcast. Miles, are you there? Might not be. Oh
I'm
yeah,
driving.
There we go. Oh yeah, there we go. Oh, okay. Oh, okay.
I'm just driving.
Oh. Okay, I won't call on you. Okay, I won't. Jaden, you said light bulb moment. What was that? What was that too?
So there's this well, I had like just a ton of ideas coming up and taking notes here on some different ideas. Like I was thinking about just I'm new to Idaho Falls. We recently moved here, and so I want to get to know more people in the area. And
Right.
you once talked about the meat salesman for like that fancy meat truck that was in your neighborhood.
Yeah.
And so that gave me the idea, and I was like, what if I just like knocked doors and gave out flyers and hosted like a backyard seminar for and like targeted the neighborhoods that are in the demographic that I want. And just like something like it didn't have to be, an industry leading people, but like you said, people that are connected locally know people more locally, and I just feel like that would generate referrals in a different way. And then the other idea that popped off that was like the light bulb is there's this physician assistant that we go to that I kind of have a man crush on. He's like the version of me, but a physician assistant, like minimalist shoes and lifts weights and just like everything that you want your doctor to be doing,
Right.
he actually is doing.
Right.
And so we love our visits with him. And I was like, what if I incorporated him on this, and he was able to start inviting his patients and like his networks, and we were able to and just grow from there and grow people that serve the same demographic but just in different ways.
Mhm.
Anyway, that was what was coming to mind.
So what you're talking about now are more education events. My experience has shown me that those don't work as well. It's just a big ask to like if somebody were to say to you, think of the difference between the two here, right? If somebody were to say to you, hey, we got all these great people in the neighborhood together to come and educate us about better health. Does that excite you? Like even if they're like great people? Or if somebody were to say to you, hey man, Jaden, we got, there's this physician assistant, like dude to add, like he's crushing it in his business. He's got a great family. Dude lifts weights, he's figured out some stuff. It's gonna be him, there's gonna be 3 or 4 others. And we're just gonna get together in the backyard and just, each of us are gonna have a little bit of time to just share some stuff about ourselves. And talk about what we're doing, talk about what we might need help with right now. I'd attend the second, I wouldn't attend the first.
Yeah, that's a great point.
And so I think with this kind of like if you're talking about educational events, it's just a different conversation. I'm not saying that it couldn't work. But now you're having to sell somebody on attending that based off of what the benefits are that they think they might be able to get. That's a hard sell versus saying to somebody, hey, you're going to be given an opportunity to connect with other great people and talk about yourself.
Right.
It's just a different conversation, and but the second one requires you to be much more targeted and pinpointed. There was a call that I had with a friend of mine. He's one of the best. I mean, all stuff that I'm thinking about these days is book marketing, but I think it relates. He's one of the best book marketers on the planet. He was Tim Ferriss's director of special operations for like a number of years. He did a bunch of the promo work for David Goggins' books. He did Ramit Sethi's stuff. And I was talking to him about my plan for promoting the obvious choice. And he's like, yeah, no, that could work. My plan was basically to like make a list of 50 or 100 people in like different categories and keep in touch with them, you know, slowly over time, over the course of a number of months. And he's like, that could work, but it sounds like a lot of work and you're probably not going to do it. I was like, yeah, you're right. Says, I wouldn't even make a list of 10 people. I'd make a list of 5 and consider 2 a win. And those 5 people is like, shoot for the stars, man. Like, in the best case scenario, the best world ever, these are people who are gonna like endorse and promote your book. Not just like, okay, because it's not this type of stuff, this world that we live in today where everything's so interconnected, it's not an 80-20 even principle. It's like a 99-1. Like one person has the potential to do more positive for your business than 1,000 others if they're well placed and well connected.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what I did. I made a list of 5. I was able to basically 2 of them I just failed to get in touch with. Like I just couldn't get in touch with them. So there were 3 that I was able to connect with like reasonably well. And one of them has ignored my messages about an endorsement. And so, you know, we'll see if he gets back to me, but it looks like he's not going to. And 2 of them have already sent back endorsements. And one of them, like the president of Shopify, like literally the guy who runs Shopify. It would be pretty hard to find a better endorsement of a book for small business owners than the guy who runs Shopify. 2 out of 5. I didn't even pass. I didn't even pass my exam. Right. But the power law distribution is just fundamentally different with this stuff. At least that's the way I'm thinking about it now. Anybody else have anything they want to add? It's okay if you don't. We could pop off, but happy to.
I just have a quick thought.
Yeah, is that you, Jacob? Yeah, cool.
Yeah, that's me. The kind of what you led in with was this: there are things that people do to break through the barrier that not everybody else is doing.
Mm-hmm.
And the main thing today was creating the room to ideally meet people who are way ahead of you on the journey.
Yes.
So I like that. And this feels like this has potential. I would be curious, what are more things people are doing to break through the barrier?
Mm-hmm.
You know, as it applies to online training, yeah, we're building our social medias, we're reaching out to people, we're doing DMs, we're keeping our bodies in shape. But that's the 99 or the 80%, right? What are the other ones doing to break through? And if one thing is creating these rooms, what are some of the other things that people are doing to break through the barrier? I'd be curious to learn that.
The biggest thing that I've seen over and over and over again is just the willingness to be proactive and make shit happen. Like I mean, instead of saying to somebody, hey, you want to work together on this thing? find somebody who you admire. If we're talking about content, if we're talking about social media, find somebody you admire, create a great piece of content that includes them prominently, send it to them and be like, I'm putting this live next Tuesday. I'd love to do it as a collab with you. Really love your work. Here's this piece of content. It's ready to go. You don't need to do anything other than click accept. Do you want to do it? And like, even if they say no, you still put that piece of content live and tag them. And they're probably going to share it to their story or whatever if they don't accept it as a collab. It's just, I think we, as a whole, take for granted just how lazy we are. I mean, it's so easy to just get caught up in just how many things there are to do on any given day just to keep up. Everybody's like that. Busier, more successful people are even more like that, not less. All that it takes is somebody proactively doing something interesting and serving it up to them on a platter, whether it is some sort of connection event, online or in person, like what I'm talking about. Like, you could be having dinner. It's Tuesday right now. You could be having dinner, I bet you, on Thursday this week with 5 of the most successful business people in your neighborhood. Purely by the rest of this day, just choosing one of them, like this physiotherapist, doing a little bit of work, finding the contact information, and inviting this other person to like a local restaurant. Everybody wants to attend that dinner. All that it takes is one person to say, "Yo, we're meeting on Thursday." That's the biggest thing that I've seen. I mean, whether it is content and collabs, whether it's connection events, whether it's speaking on stages, even like getting media, like local media. Like, people who work for newspapers and radio stations and TV stations, like, they're ecstatic to get pitched something that's good and ready to go. No, I mean, that's probably not the best use of your time, but it's just another example of just like, it's just that little bit of proactivity. That's all.
Amber here. Thanks for listening in. This episode was from a group call from Jonathan's online trainer mentorship, where we host hot seats every 2 weeks. The mentorship is where we take anyone doing from $1,000 to $20,000 a month or more and help them scale up. If that sounds like something you'd be interested in learning more about, please DM the word mentor to Jonathan on Instagram @itscoachgoodman. If you're looking for another episode to listen to right now, I'd recommend episode 258, The Value of Demented Theater. The things we love to talk about aren't always the same things our ideal clients want to hear. You can get them to care, but you'll need to earn their attention first. In this episode, you'll learn how to escape FOMO when the social world you exist in makes you feel left out, the disconnect between the big ideas you want to talk about and your client's waterline problem, and in order to get people to care, you'll need a little demented theater. Again, that's episode 258, The Value of Demented Theater. Thanks again for listening, and we'll catch you next week.